The year is 2003. Cristiano Ronaldo made his debut for Manchester United, a notion that would repeat itself this year. Harley-Davidson celebrated its 100-year anniversary, and a very special handheld console, one that brought me years of entertainment, was officially announced at E3 2003. But I don't have to tell you what it is vocally just yet.
Just read the title, you bloody ingrates!
This handheld console was made during an era when Nintendo dominated the handheld gaming market. In fact, they still kinda do with the Switch, but with the influx of mobile games advertising sexy waifus, console quality graphics, loot boxes, etc. for phones, any company that isn't Nintendo that would dare make a handheld console will probably suffer, since mobile gaming is hands down the ultimate replacement for the market. I digress though. Nintendo had their hands tightly gripped around the handheld gaming market's crotch and were refusing to let go. All those who opposed them failed miserably. The Nokia N-Gage, Dead Food, Tiger Electronics Gamecom that had a whopping 8-bit CPU. To be honest, I'm surprised they got so many registers on it, cause, you know, they made other consoles that shall only be named in meme format. Sega's Game Gear, which I hear was an alright console, but it still failed to dethrone Nintendo. It was only after that E3 announcement back in 2003 that the king would finally be dethroned. Who could possibly have done that? Well, this time, I'll tell you all vocally. That, my viewers, was the PSP. Now, I plan on doing some diving in this video, but not that deep. That's because I want to add a very personal yet fun touch to everything. You see, I want to make a great retrospective on the console, don't get me wrong. This video is very much an informative piece of writing, but other people have made a video going over this console's history. So, how do I make this video in particular stand out from the rest? I unleash my inner gamer. In this video, I plan on playing and reviewing 2 games that I owned when I played on the console, and then 2 other games that I never owned, but I can't just review them for what they are. I also plan on using the games as devices to further support my criticisms of the PSP. So, with haste, let me just give you a very brief breakdown of the PSP's rise and fall, and then we can get into what you all really want to see. Except for the last game. No one wants to see the last game. The PSP was dubbed the Walkman of the 21st century. A very bold claim made by Ken Kutaragi, but was it justified? In my opinion, yes and no. No, because the iPod existed in the 21st century, and yes, because we need to dive into the specs that actually made up the PSP. You could basically call it a Swiss Army knife. The PSP was capable of running games at a near console-like state, obviously, playing movies and music, and searching the internet. A feature which got it flagged in the news more than once. It was a multi-purpose multimedia device that tried to push a new format of data storage. The UMD, or Universal Media Disc for long, was the central way of using the PSP's multimedia facets. Unless, you know, you got like a 2TB micro SD that can store a bajillion games that can be used for nefarious acts of piracy. The UMD was basically Sony's Laserdisc-esque disc format. They died out, and there are a multitude of reasons why, those of which I will not mention but can be found in the sources section of the description. But despite that, the PSP did do somewhat of a good job at dethroning the DS. Up until the DS became the greatest handheld to ever be released on the planet. At launch, no handheld could have compared to the PSP in raw power. Sure, it had to make a lot of cutbacks if a version of a game was also released on a home console, but in terms of gameplay, it was practically identical. There were also places where the differences were extremely noticeable, but those games could hold their own. In fact, one of them I'll be playing is one of the most recommended titles for the console. At launch, the PSP sold more day 1 copies than the DS, and was more popular, but that's mainly because they sported different designs. Whilst the PSP had a more slicker design, the DS was out here looking like flippin' War Machine out of Iron Man. Alas! The touchscreen could have been seen as just a mere gimmick, but it would turn out that the touchscreen was a massive part of its domination in the future of the PSP. PSP went through multiple versions, some of which betrayed the original design philosophy. If you do your research, the PSP Street was actually one of the worst models the PSP had in terms of its hardware. The DS just released higher quality games that supported its main feature, which was what gave it a massive edge over the PSP. Popularity for the console declined, and as a result, with a heavy heart, Sony discontinued it in January of 2014. Its online market still lived on for a while, but since it was so outdated at the time, especially with a device like the Nintendo Switch, they stopped supporting it. I don't think this should discredit it though. It managed to do the one thing that no handheld could accomplish: challenge Nintendo and win. Even though it was brief, it was still worth mentioning. I was first encouraged to get the console because so many of my peers and friends had it. They also played games from franchises that I very much adored back as a child, but may have grown distant to as of late. The experiences that it gave me will always live on in my heart. Playing multiplayer with my friend on Sonic Rivals, getting nutted by the androids in DBZ Tenkaichi Tag Team. Heck, borrowing and swapping games between me and my older brother's friends since they were so abundant and easy to obtain in stores. The PSP was something you either had to experience or not in its heyday. The legacy of the PSP must live on. That's why I have decided to shelf out some good money and purchase another one just for the sake of this video. I beg your pardon? Let me just hold up. Okay. What do you mean when you say someone bid higher than me? Can't we bid more? What do you mean it's a bad idea? Of course it's a good idea. Wait. Mario sold for how much during an auction? Emulation never hurt anyone, right? I mean, all I'm doing is giving my device software to run other software. Nothing illegal about that. Don't look at me like that. I'm only playing games that aren't being distributed anymore. Whether or not I buy them legitimately will not affect the developer's profits, so the Lord can look down upon me just as disappointed as he was before. Also, I'm not spending thousands of dollars on an auction, no way. So, I'm going to start the game showcase now. I plan on making this a personal and nostalgic experience that will also be used as a means of criticizing the PSP's strengths and weaknesses. Now, as I've said, the DS had a much better library of games. We're talking Pokemon in its primal state, New Super Mario Bros., the whole shebang. What revolutionary handheld titles did we have on the PSP? I mean, some of the games were actually pretty good, but does anyone remember Mod Nation Racing? That aside, I want to review these games in a way that would make anyone want to revisit them, whether they somehow get a hold of a PSP or just emulate it. Okay, there are only two worth revisiting that I could recommend. Thankfully, one of them is a game that I owned, and the other one is one that I didn't, so it kinda balances things out. So now that everything is established, let's actually move on to the first title. If you were looking for what I consider the best action platformer that I've played on the PSP, look no further than Daxter. If you dare look at Ratchet & Clank Size Matters, I will personally make an appearance within your vicinity and delete System 32 off your desktop computer. Oh what? You're using a mobile device to watch this? I'll find another way. Daxter is the longtime companion of Jack, the titular character of his own PlayStation game franchise. This game was developed by Ready at Dawn Studios and not Naughty Dog because they probably couldn't be asked to make a spin-off game. Although, I'd like to say that Daxter is kind of a hidden gem. I mean, the story sucks booty cheeks because the game forgets it halfway through, you barely interact with the main plot device of the game being Osmo, the guy who enabled you to actually play the game, and the hub world is absolutely empty unless you really try to get those precursor orbs. Great start, but that's not where the fun is. The only thing worth mentioning in this game is the main game, because as I said, the story sucks, side content sucks, and the main game is very good. So, you go around exterminating bugs in these very well designed locations. Unfortunately, I can't show you most of them because when I was screen recording, OBS does this thing where it converts .mkv files into .flv files, which are slightly less compatible with my editing software. All I can tell you is that many of the locations in Daxter look aesthetically pleasing as frick. The combat for me was mostly satisfying. You have the ability to chain your combos into this one slam attack, which can one-shot a lot of the enemies in the game, thus removing a lot of the mundanity seen in beat-em-up brawlers. You also have 3 gadgets. One is a fumigator, which you can use to stun fast enemies. Another is a flamethrower, which can make someone feel really bad for using it, seeing as how once you burn a bug, you just have to sit there and watch them die slowly. You also have a noob tube, but I do have my gripes with it, and the fumigator to a certain extent. Outside of combat, you can use these gadgets for a short hover that can be replenished by green gas orbs. The fumigator is the weakest hover device since it's just pure gas. The flamethrower is stronger since you ignite the gas and it combusts to give you extra height. The noob tube makes you hover just as high as the flamethrower does, but it drops the tube for an AoE attack, but that feature has no practical use outside of combat. It can only be used as a means of beating large groups of enemies and getting bosses to get down from their vantage points, which happen to be very specific events. It isn't used for any puzzles, just combat. The flamethrower is applied in multiple levels. It's used to heat up springs to make them expand and unwind. It can be used to melt the ice in the fish level. I hate the fish level. The fumigator is used mostly for combat as well, but I do see that it has some benefits. Sometimes the flamethrower can boost you too high and consume too much energy, so the fumigator is there as a balancer. You can mix and match the flamethrower and fumigator, whereas the noob tube is just something that's there to make you feel overpowered. But I mean, even though it does that, this game can be very ruthless. Your hitbox is the most inconsistent mess imaginable. You might think you're close to hitting an enemy, but they just bop you and you can't do anything about it. I guess in a way, since Daxter is pretty overpowered, they somewhat create balance. However, when I look at this game in retrospect, that point is a bit of a stretch seeing as how annoying this game can be. You also have the option of skipping enemies completely, but the game is smart. They make them easy enough to beat, but hard to avoid. But I mean, one of the reasons why they're so hard to avoid is the camera. You can only rotate it horizontally, unless you go into first-person mode, which is not useful at all, seeing as how I forgot it was a feature until I wrote this part. I may bash Daxter a lot, but it's just an addictive experience. You pick up the game and you think you're going to play for an hour, but then you get lost in the fun of it all and how fast-paced it is with its progression, and then you find yourself halfway through the game. That is a true gaming experience. The only issue that a home console port of Daxter could possibly fix is the camera. Yeah, it may make the graphics look slightly cleaner, but the lower powered aesthetic is somewhat more atmospheric for me. Daxter, in my opinion, was a must-have game for the PSP. I couldn't think of any ways to transition things, so I may as well just give you the next title screen. This is the second time I am recording this section of this video, and that's because I was struggling to find a way to review this game without going off topic, talking about something for too long, or just being messy with the review. I also wanted this part to have a much more in-depth review than Daxter, since I was actually able to get footage this time round of a whole playthrough. In fact, all the way back in 2019, I recorded a full playthrough of this game in the hopes that I could make a donkey-styled compilation video of me exploiting and fumbling around in this game. This game being Ben 10 Protector of Earth. Now, when I say I recorded footage in 2019, it was footage from PCSX2, the PS2 emulator, so I thought I could use that footage in this video, but that would ruin how genuine this video is. Then I had an epiphany. I can still use the PS2 footage, but compare it to the PSP footage since that would actually make a much better retrospective on the console. So, to start off, I want to firstly talk about the version differences. If you played this game on Wii, PS2, or PSP, then you basically had the exact same game. It's just that the PSP didn't have features like co-op, and we cannot forget the most despicable sin of them all.
There was no vocal audio in the in-game cutscenes.
This is actually a very common cutback made in many PSP games. It happens in every single Ben 10 game that has a home console port. It even happened in another Cartoon Network title, Bakugan Defenders of the Core. I also had the privilege of owning the PS3 version of that game. They not only got rid of the in-game dialogue audio, but they got rid of a character creation feature which you could use for your character in the story. You were then forced to walk around looking like this generic piece of garbage. I digress. The version differences in PoE really didn't affect the gameplay whatsoever. It's basically the exact same game for the Wii, PS2, and PSP. The DS version is a different story. You still have the plot of Vulgax stealing DNA from the Omnitrix and recruiting some of Ben's greatest enemies to help him conquer the world. You still have the fast-paced and spammy combat of a beat-em-up brawler. What else could you want? Well, maybe an actual game that's good. My biggest gripe with the combat in this game is that you really can't experiment with it. You are only really given the options to knock enemies back with your OP as hell attacks, block, run, clear the area, then move on through a linear as hell level that has nothing left to find. unless the devs were oh so kind enough to have left a neat little collectible. There are so many ways offered to you by beat-em-ups to absolutely abuse their enemies, but PoE, when I compare it to other fighting games, is one of the least satisfying. The only viable option in this game is spamming, that's it. The levels are all designed to be beaten as fast as possible, not to see how big of a combo you can rack up, not to see how high your multiplier went up because you decided to be innovative and experiment with the combat. You were only tested on time. Now, time is a bit of a picky thing to test people on. I mean, Sonic games want to be beaten quickly, but time isn't the only factor in getting the highest rank. There really isn't any other incentive on beating PoE other than bettering your time, so it really isn't worth revisiting. The side content isn't really much to be desired either. You may as well just look up what you get on the internet. There are cheat codes to get skins for aliens as well as upgrades in the main game, but this game isn't that hard. You don't really need to cheat to win. This game would have really been awesome to a 7-year-old who loves Ben 10, but to someone who's almost 18, this hasn't aged that well. The aesthetic in this game has aged like well, milk, really. It really isn't atmospheric at all to go through. I mean, the game does have interesting set pieces like the train segment, but how can you experience them to the fullest if you're just going to get punished for dawdling? You see how much it hurts the nostalgia aspect? If there really was anything to come back to this game for, I guess it would have to be the spectacle of the special moves and the boss fights. Now, the boss fights are the easiest thing to remember this game for since they were pretty iconic. From the enigmatic bouts with Ghost Freak to the Goliath that is Vulgax. These are fights that no matter what version of the game you played other than the DS one, you will remember. Ghost Freak's fight is memorable because it actively sets itself apart from any other in the game. He jumps from one minion to the next, possessing them, thus making you unable to damage him in his first phase. You know as a Ben 10 fan that the only way to hurt him is sunlight, so you have to whittle down his vessels just enough so that he comes out and you can strike him where it hurts. Then his second phase, the one that caused me so much stress when I was so young. Ghost Freak crashes down into the depths of his lair, and your only way of getting to fight him on your terms is if you do the statue puzzle. I mean, when you look at it now, the puzzle is actually extremely easy, but when you were a little kid and you see a puzzle, it's like you're going through fire and flames just to solve it. I just wish that the devs were more harsh on this section, because he really only just floats there and you can't get penalized for it other than losing a ranking for a bad time. Like, why not make a Ghost Freak attack you while you're doing the puzzle to waste time, and if you don't complete it, he gets a hell of a lot stronger. But if you manage to turn the tides, you get massive bonus points. This game's biggest issue is just inspiration. I mean, even though I'm bashing it, I still had fun going through it, but the only thing that actually made this game matter was that Ben 10 was on the box. This game was also technically a must-have for many. I mean, the main reason I bought the PSP was this game, but to be honest, my taste in video games wasn't great back then. Just slap on the name of a popular franchise that I like, and then I'm sold. I'll fall in love with the game instantly. If you really do want to play this game, then I have a challenge for you. Beat it in less than 4 hours on the hardest difficulty, without cheats and without New Game Plus. So basically, start this game afresh and beat my any percent time. Okay now that that's done, let's move on to a game that's actually worth playing. Other than Daxter. I am going to be blatantly honest with you. This section was meant to belong to P3P, but I decided that since I already had a full playthrough of this game in particular, I may as well do it first. So there was this trend in the anime industry where poorly written VNs were made to promote newly released rom-com series, or an anime was released to promote a VN. Mark my words, I will be making a review on Grisaya at some point or another. Anyways, for the prior, these VNs tended not only to be poorly written pieces of garbage, but poorly written pieces of garbage that bastardized characters in the original source material. If you want an example of this, look no further than Toradora Portable. This game takes place immediately after the Christmas episode of TD. Make note of that. Ryuji, the frickin' melon head of an anime protagonist that he is, goes and gets himself amnesia. Stupid Ryuji. So it's up to you to go around the town and chat up a storm with every person you encounter, in the hopes that you can get back the memories that Ryuji lost. A bit of a strange premise for a Toradora storyline, but let's see how it works out. Surely it does just enough to make me feel like the Palm Top Tiger. Why the hell is Ryuji referring to his mom as a sexy lady? Why the hell are you capable of going out with your teacher? So it's one of these games. Well, I mean, clearly it can't get any worse. Oh. She must be hiding cinnamon buns under her shirt. No wonder she looks so fat. The copium isn't enough. Yeah, so this game, much like Persona, gives you the option to be an absolutely dirty boy. Considering the ending I got, I would much rather be a masochist than have Ryuji call his mom a sexy lady. So this game has 3 main mechanics you can really use. Walking in the overworld, where you can go from 0 to 100 real quick, this cleaning mini-game where you can get items to get extra interactions with characters, and of course, the actual visual novel itself, with options that may determine your ending. Now, there isn't really much to write home about. Essentially, all you do is just talk about getting your memory back and what happened at the Christmas party with Minori. But because of the path I chose, I never really explored that part of the plot to its full extent. What I did explore was Ami-san and how this game turned her into an utter slag. Pardon my language. What I meant to say was ho. So remember how I said that these games can bastardize characters? Well, that exact thing happened with Ami. If I remember correctly, way before the Christmas episode began, Ami-san genuinely began to care for her classmates and Taiga. So I, being under that impression, decided to try and win her over because I thought, hey, let's give Ami-san a win for once. So I chatted her up and then she wanted to go on a date. Unbeknownst to me, Ami-san had invited Taiga immediately after the date ended to flaunt in her face about how she had won Ryuji over. Taiga said some things to Ami-san to the point where I went ahead and said some horrible stuff to her in order to defend Ami's honor. So basically, I went ahead and made Taiga feel like a piece of crap for no reason. All because I was under the impression that Ami was a changed person, but no. Apparently Thomas Ostrach wrote this game because apparently she is irredeemable. She manipulated me, turned me into her slave. All because I believed she had good in her heart. When I watched the credits roll, I felt an immense sense of guilt and disappointment. I let my desires get the best of me, and not only did I hurt one of the girls who I put as god tier in my tier list, but I lost Ryuji's best friend. I'm not a good person. I don't think I ever was a good person. I'm just bad. Wait, how the hell did I let a crappy visual novel hit me so close to home? This game has lolly pregnancy. How should anyone find any meaning within it? Yeah, I strongly recommend you don't try to revisit this game if you want to emulate the PSP. I guess VNs were good because they complemented the PSP's portability. Just being able to play your VNs on the go, play your dating sims. I guess for a lot of weeaboos out there, these games are the only pieces of dating advice they have ever gotten. You get it? Because all of us are single. So now that we've gotten the terrible as hell visual novel out of the way, let's get into the actual visual novel that is worth playing to begin with. If there was any game most worth playing on this list, it's this one. Persona 3 Portable is by far one of, if not the best PSP game I have ever played. Now, version differences may include adding an agenda selection feature. In fact, Persona 3 Portable is the only Persona game to have agenda selection feature. There is also one major cutback which, to many, may make or break their experience with the game. Part of what makes Persona games engaging is naturalism. The amount of attention to detail, like the glowing lights of the city at night and the rain dropping down on the earth, creating this soothing ambience. It's also atmospheric. These allow players to enjoy their downtime from all the action they have had to experience. So that's why I say that the exclusion of the game's overworld, the place where you could get this atmosphere, is not only a thing that will make players not want to give this game the time of day, but it's also a necessary evil. Simply removing sound files from a game may be questionable, but an entire overworld is completely understandable. The console would probably not be able to handle all of that, making the load times much worse than they already probably were. Instead, we are given a point-and-click game for our overworld, and that makes you think, damn, so I'm just playing a visual novel. The thing is, at some point, you get used to everything and realize that it actually isn't that bad. The story is still just as engaging, and hey, we actually have voice acting. There is enough personality, profoundness, but most of all, fun that can be found in P3P. Just enough to make you overlook all of those cutbacks. Persona games don't have random encounters and actually make turn-based combat engaging, and P3P does just that when you eventually get to Tartarus. Yeah, it takes an hour and a half of dialogue to get to, but the wait is actually worth it. That time spent in the beginning was necessary to get you acquainted with the characters. Yukari is immediately engaging, as you can already tell she is an individual who lacks nerves, but is still willing to fight the good fights to cultivate her confidence and become a better individual down the line. Mitsuru is intentionally keeping you in the dark about a lot of stuff, so you want to be able to gain her trust and become someone she relies on. That's why she comes to you, and only you, for guidance with the student council. Junpei? I'm sorry, Edward, I just don't know what to do with you. Although this game has been stripped down of the bare essentials one would want in a Persona game, it is still a Persona game, and one that is definitely worth playing on the PSP. I put at least 6 hours into it for this video, and will probably put in a hell of a lot more. The thing is, right, if I want to go through the whole of Persona 3, I'm probably just going to emulate the PS2 version just for the overworld and atmosphere. But if you want a nice streamlined game, then this is good enough for you to sink your teeth in. So, here it is, the best game I have played on the PSP. I really don't have a conclusion for this video, since I think I did well enough in summing up my points at the end of each section. So I just want to end things off with a massive thank you to my community for giving me the privilege of reaching 200 subscribers. I know it really isn't a big number in this era of the internet, but to me, it's a big thing. It means quite a bit of people care about what I have to say and how I go about saying it. Also, it brings me closer to making this a part-time career where I could reap the benefits of this and use my channel to help further fuel my ambitions. So, again, thank you for the numbers. The next time you'll see me, I will either be making a character analysis on one of 2 sword users, or I'll be gone for many months making my Ruby video. I have been your femboy. Thank you, go well, and have a good week.